If you've been dreaming about a place where life feels a little more intentional, discover the Canopy in Sebastopol by City Ventures. This new community offers solar-powered homes, surrounded by mature trees, nature preserves, and walking trails, with a vibrant local downtown, renowned wineries, and the Bay Area all within easy reach. Enjoy low-maintenance living, refined design, and built-in eco-friendly features that make everyday life easier. Start your next chapter at the Canopy by City Ventures. Visit cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
I think most people are looking for more simplicity these days. That's one reason I appreciate Azure Standard. At first, I thought it was just about groceries. Then, I discovered gardening supplies, pantry staples, household products, and so many of the other things we use every day. They've spent over 30 years delivering clean, organic groceries and earth-friendly products to families who care about what goes on their plates and into their lives. Everything they offer is rooted in real nutrition, transparency, and trust. What I like is that it encourages a different mindset. Instead of constantly running to the store, you begin thinking about your home differently. You stock your pantry, you plan family meals, maybe you plant a garden. You become a little more intentional about what you bring into your home. That's what abundance means to me. Experience new products and stock up on your favorites during this month's Waves of Abundance sales. Discover a simpler, healthier way to shop for the things that matter most at azurestandard.com. That's AZURE standard.com.
Yeah, alright. I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. Now, this week we're going to be trying a little bit of homegrown. It's a nice little, it's been cultured in my own brain for a while, this one. It's been stewing. I've been spraying it with Sif and a little bit of Domestos in order to really, bring out the flavours, bring out the scents. It's a nice homegrown conspiracy. It's not one that I've ever seen anywhere else either. I haven't picked it up from anywhere else. I'm pretty sure this is another one of just mine. I think I've come up with this and I've put the evidence together for you. Hopefully it's going to make sense. And we're going to look into something that darts through our skies. Something that the Chinese are famous for. Something that can be used for both celebration and cremation. This is a conspiracy that I like to call the Big Bang Theory. If historians and revisionists are allowed to retroactively change events and reuse names of past things, why can't I do it and all? But first, let's have a song. This is Arachnid by LO8, King Crooked, JR, Locksmith, Vega the 7 and Ronin. We're going to start this week with a great British conspiracy, which would be a well-good TV show for Channel 4 or Channel 5 to pick up. They get 12 people from Britain and they've all got to create their own conspiracy each week, and then you could have David Icke, Linda Moulton-Howe and Sean Ryder judge it based on their experience. You could have it presented as well by people that have got no reason to be included in a conspiracy TV show. Like, how all the Bake Off judges were used in order to sort of bring in a younger audience and different audiences. So you could have, like Claire Balding being a presenter paired up with someone like Jim Davison to bring in a bit of lightheartedness to the whole thing. Then you could get Jim crying at the end of episode 4 when Teddy gets voted out because he was a bit light on the Jews this week and relied far too heavily on referencing the Patriot Act of America. The big celebrated moment of the series, every other week or so, would be when Mr. Ike leans towards your conspiracy board and gives it a nice pat before leaning in to give a firm handshake. Then, in the finale, the winner gets a great British conspiracy trench coat and a decorative Crazy Susan to put on the mantelpiece when they get home. But this, what we're going to talk about, this is a real Great British conspiracy from around the time that Great Britain was starting to form as we know it today as Great Britain, back in the late 1500s, maybe the early 1600s, when when the Spanish were going mental. There was a king that was about to unify Scotland, which was just as heavily contested back then, really, as it is now about the conflammation. Is it the combination? Probably the better word. I don't think conflammation is a word. I want to say bringing together, the unification of Scotland and England wasn't really heralded back then as a good idea, just like it's not now by a lot of Scottish people. But this king, this fella, was King James VI, except soon he was going to somehow rewrite history and become James I, because he'd be the king of the unified lands and the first James to ever do that. He was also planning on doing something that was going to affect the UK for the rest of time as we know it. Maybe, quite possibly even America and all. He was going to be responsible for consolidating religious knowledge, removing religious knowledge, altering history and cause confusion for hundreds of years to come. King James was about to put his name and face to a book known as the King James edition of the Bible, and there's very little that's changed really since that's been done. That Bible was written by a huge writing team, just like now, and then they get a celebrity to pin the book on, like the King back then was the biggest celebrity going, so they pinned it on the King, and this writing team knows that this will help the book sell better because everyone knows his face, and this time they really cracked it. I guess it was a bit of beginner's luck, because this book went on to be the best-selling book all around the world. There was a few people massively opposed to this fella getting about changing the good word of the Lord though, and there was one guy in particular who'd been known as the guy for years, the guy everyone remembers, the main guy, the only guy you need to know, the guy that you can depend on, and his name was Guy, the original freedom fighter who would be celebrated by working class people all across the British Isles for at least 400 years, because he's still celebrated now. Now, his full name was Guy Fawkes, and he was going to help explain why there's a conspiracy around fireworks. After returning from a war fighting for some Spanish blokes, he came back to England a bit pissed off, and he came back here with his new bum buddy called Robert Catesby. And I imagine their meeting went something like, "I'm not your guy, Bobby. I'm not your Bobby, Guy. I'm not your guy, Bobby. I'm not your Bobby, Guy. I'm not your guy, Bobby. I'm not your Bobby, Guy." Anyway, Guy wanted to lead, or at least catalyse a Catholic rebellion in England after experiencing both sides of the religious fence, and obviously preferring his stepdad over his real dad, which does seem a bit unfair because his dad didn't leave him like many of our dads do today. He died when Guy was 7 or 8 or so. Now in modern times it's pretty normal for your dad to die when you hit middle age, and that was no different in the Middle Ages, but Guy did better than average, and Guy managed to live to the ripe old age of 36, where his neck got broken on the day he was to be young, drawn and quartered by a group of angry horses, whilst loads of other people looked on eating some form of snack, like they're at the cinema, because the cinema was yet to be invented. So they used to go and watch, people be killed that they'd seen in the papers. Kind of like what they do now with celebrities, where they build them up and then fuck them up, and then we all celebrate when they go mental. Anyway, somehow, Guy managed to slip and fall on his way to the gallows, so maybe he managed to top himself, or, to get out of the way of being killed like this. Or possibly Guy Fawkes might have been a life actor, like the ones that we covered a few weeks ago, and after managing to complete his job in the timeline, he was able to just slip out of this world and out of this reality, ready to come back in the future, or maybe slip into the past in order to be able to fulfill his next duty in one of the new skin masks. Maybe he was a renegade life actor though, because every year since his death, we now burn his effigy on top of bonfires, whilst young children sit and beg outside of petrol stations with their own effigies, trying to collect cash as a tribute to the fallen hero known as Guy Fawkes. But is Guy the hero that we're all told he was by our dads when we were kids? Could it be that the upper classes of us, gather round ritualistic bonfires once a year and burn the man who could have saved us from today's tyrannical government and their stranglehold on our independent freedoms? They have us gather around and eat apples, except the apples get covered in molten sugar, so that shows us that the dentists are in cahoots with these people. We could also extrapolate further from these sugary treats though. Could the weird celebration of Bonfire Night be a way of the real enemy, the UK government, trying to take away the NHS? Because dentists usually charge for their services, whereas doctors don't. Seeing the doctor costs the council money, doesn't cost us money, and the famous saying of "an apple away keeps the doctor away" could be a lot more true than we first thought. We keep celebrating the death of the man who attempted to free this country from its oppressors, all whilst eating apples on sticks, meaning that we'll have less need to go to the GP to go and see the doctor, meaning the government can slowly cut funding from the NHS, all whilst we stand around, rot our teeth and inhale fumes from petrol and tannalised timber. All things that in the future are going to lead to doctor visits further down the line, but possibly in a time where we then have to pay to visit the doctor, just like they do in America. Let's have a song though, and then we're going to explore how America is also using fireworks to manipulate their people. This is Unbelievable by Dave East and Method Man. Got some new crystals and fossils in recently on worldaroundyou.com. There's also, bobblehead ducklings, rat pencil cases, shirts as well with stuff on, canvases also. So if you join the Patreon, you get a discount code for certain shirts and the canvases. So patreon.com/worldaroundyou or just worldaroundyou.com. Anyway, there's a link to everything in the description below. I'll let you carry on with the show. So, in America, they use gunpowder very differently to us in England. A lot of it gets used in this American phenomena called gang warfare, which seems to be where children and teenagers shoot each other in the streets to try and impress the older people that live in the areas that they live. That they want to impress and be friends with or work for. They also use a lot of their gunpowder in events known as school shootings, which is where teenagers and children kill each other, except they do it whilst they're at school. So we can see the issues aren't some form of educational problem amongst shootings. It doesn't matter if the child regularly attends school or if they get educated in the streets. Either way, American children have a penchant for gunpowder. Now, you can have guns in every state of America as well. There's just different rules around obtaining them. But in America, you're not allowed to buy fireworks in every state. You can own a grenade launcher and hand grenades in pretty much every state, but not Catherine wheels, not a Roman candle. Ohio, Vermont, Massachusetts and Illinois are all very strict when it comes to buying fireworks. In fact, you're not allowed to at all in Massachusetts. No one is allowed to buy fireworks. I imagine there may be a license or something for arranged shows, but nothing that I could find, so maybe they just don't do firework displays in Massachusetts. They want to save all of the gunpowder for the children, for the little American boys and girls, because if they're not going to use it at school or on the streets outside their house when they're playing on the block, they can maybe save it up and use it when they're all propagandized into going to war for America. Rather than letting the adults enjoy themselves with a few beers and a packet of rockets, they'd rather the kids could injure each other. Now, I don't know if gunpowder is used in fireworks, but you get my point. Now, in Ohio, that's where the Mormons are, innit? So, a lot of them. So you could expect it to be stricter there for most things, but what if they restrict the use of fireworks because of the aliens? Now, we know that the Mormon Church only exists because Joseph Smith was visited by a couple of aliens whilst he lived in the woods of New York. So, could the restriction of fireworks be in place just in case the fireworks prevent the aliens from coming back to visit modern-day Mormons in Ohio? They don't want the things interrupting the airspace, the explosions, and they definitely don't want the explosions and fire and literal bombs in the air and missiles. That's what rockets are, really. They could be seen as missiles. They don't want them being perceived as threatening by the possible aliens or angels. But from our episode on angels, we learned that Moroni and that are probably more likely to be aliens than an angel because they presented themselves in human form. Quite possibly as well even the devil or a demon, but ignoring that, we're going to stick with aliens for the sake of this. But it makes a lot less sense when you think that, because when you realise Nevada allows for the sale of fireworks, and a lot of people believe there's loads of alien activity in Nevada because of Area 51 and stuff like that. But what if Nevada is like customs for alien visitors, whilst Ohio is where they sneak across the border? Like Americans believe about the Mexicans, or a child struggling with a paint-by-numbers kit. Could there be a much more sinister reason why they don't allow fireworks to be bought in those parts of America? Could these states in America be the locations of the Stargates, like what Saddam Hussein supposedly had? Or is it where some of the glazed perception filters are? It seems strange to assume that though, because Florida's got tons of fireworks displays, and Florida's home to Cape Canaveral and a couple other spaceports where they fire off fucking actual rockets into the sky. Some people believe at the firmament, some people believe into outer space, some people believe to the moon, blah blah blah. But either way, they put rockets with people in our satellites and launch them regularly from Florida. And wouldn't that affect alien spaceships? And our own, if there was fireworks there. If the fireworks are affecting alien spaceships, would they not bother ours? Why can we launch our own, but the fireworks don't get in the way there? So maybe that's not right. Or could it be that our secret weapon within the space wars that was started by Ronald Reagan in the 80s, Could it be that we're able to pollute their engines if they enter our atmosphere? Or is the legal status a way of controlling the terraforming of the Earth? Just like how Elon Musk recently said that we'd have to launch nuclear bombs at certain parts of Mars to speed up the terraforming process on there. Could it be that the various industrial revolutions around the world have been a way to subtly terraform the planet? Could the induction engine have been a helpful byproduct of terraforming? It's hard to know. But in America, they tend to use a lot of fireworks for Independence Day, which seems to be the day the Americans celebrate it, going at it on their own, without the gentle guiding hand and assistance of the British monarchy. Something to do with tea and throwing it into the waters around the Boston docks, which is something that the Americans have stuck to ever since, using Chinese manufactured produce to pollute the world in order for them as a country to get what they want. Nowadays, instead of using Chinese-grown tea, they use Chinese labour forces to use the lithium that gets extracted from mines in other parts of Asia by what should probably be referred to as child slaves, but because they get paid a small amount of money, somehow are just referred to as a child labour force, and a culturally acceptable thing because that's just what they do there. If we wanted to, I suppose we could view Americans' Independence Day as a way that the Americans showed the hand to the rest of the world. Because they put all of that tea into the water, which then flavoured and polluted the water. But they polluted the water in order to be able to control their own population without the need for Haven holiday camp representatives to be involved in overseeing the comings and goings of the various political officers at the time. They're still polluting their water to this day as well, cramming it full of fluoride and whatever other chemicals our collective imaginations can conjure, not to mention all the recycled piss and shit particles that'll be in there after a measly sieving and a bit of bleach. It's almost as if they want to kill their people. Maybe the British monarchy was against that. It makes sense that the monarchy would be against it because a monarchy needs subjects to rule, whereas America's always kind of felt like it wants subjects to study. That mostly seems to have come about as well from when they took in a load of Nazis under the wing after the end of World War II through Operation Paperclip, but this isn't about Operation Paperclip, but probably not the first mention of the Nazis of the episode. Well, definitely the first of the episode, but not the last, is what I mean to say. One thing that I don't understand, though, about Independence Day is the time of year that they choose for it. Because we've moved Christmas, Christmas isn't when Christmas is supposed to be. And we seem to have moved New Year's Eve as well, seeing how the other and older cultures celebrate it at a different time to us, either if it's based off the moon or whatever. And it would have been moved again if George Eastman got his way from Kodak and managed to introduce his 13th month to the year. It's obvious that we do New Year's Eve in the darkest part of winter for similar reasons to why we have Christmas in winter. It's to just cheer people up a bit, innit? Christmas should be in the summer, realistically, if it was made to celebrate the birth of Jesus. I think it's sometime around August. Otherwise, it's just a almost identical replacement of a pagan feast that takes place in the winter in olden times and for pagans of today. It makes sense as well to have New Year's Eve in winter so that the fireworks look better as the sky gets darker. So why do Americans insist on releasing fireworks in the first week of July? I mean, we could probably blame their education system, which is supposed to be rated as one of the worst in the world, where they think, let's have the fireworks when it's sunny, But I don't think we can blame that because they've got enough going on in schools to actually start paying attention to the books when they're getting, the fear of God put into them and having to sing songs about the president and the flag and stuff every day. A lot like a dictatorship how we would see a dictatorship if another country was doing that, where the people looked different to us or maybe spoke a different language to us. We'd probably go in there and what would we call it? We'd probably call it liberation if we went in there and stopped that with a bunch of people that were, maybe spoke a different language, looked a different colour, had a different style of haircut, things like that. But we don't do it with America for some reason. And I've always thought in England, though, that we have our fireworks nights in winter as a means of hiding the pollution it causes so that no one can see the smoke they're inhaling from the chemicals, whilst the mayors of the town prance around the bonfire to make it seem like it's normal to breathe it all in. But if you pay attention at a bonfire night, the mayors are normally all gone before the explosion of the third Roman candle. Maybe there's some other idea. Maybe it's a distraction. Maybe there's something going on, elsewhere on the 4th of July in America. We already know that they've got subterranean species that come out of the ground every 20 years or so called cicadas. So it's not too much of a leap to believe that maybe there's another species of ground-dwelling creature that comes out of the ground each year around that time. Maybe the Americans are trying to scare them back down by exploding things in the air around the ground that they hide in, keeping the American people safe for another year from the gnome-like creatures of the deep. But let's have a song. This is Look Mama by King Crooked and Joel Ortiz. Today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh. Do you feel like you're stuck in a dinner rut? With HelloFresh you get fresh, pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. Skip all those trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun and affordable. You can now enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in half an hour or less, with over 25 recipes to choose from each week. There's something for everyone to enjoy. All recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure deliciousness and simplicity. Now, I've not signed up myself, but I've had a little look at what food is on there, and this week it seems like there's a lot of stuff purposely on there just to test my accent, because I can't pronounce a lot of it, so I'm not even going to try. But the Coronation Chicken Curry looks pretty nice. The Teriyaki Pork Mint Stir Fry, something I've never heard of, but I'd definitely give a go. Mexican Style Chicken and Sweet Corn Stew looks and sounds like it'd be quite nice. And then you've got stuff like creamy truffle, mushroom and spinach pie. I've never tried truffles. I wouldn't even know where to buy them, but these are, you get the truffles with it, innit? Like stuff there you'd think, I wouldn't normally buy that myself, but you can give it a go here. Honey mustard glazed pork steak sounds pretty nice as well. So go to the link in the show notes and get 50% off your first box and then 35% off your next 3 boxes. That's the link in our show notes for 50% off your first box and then 35% off your next 3 boxes. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit. If you're enjoying the show, whilst I've got hold of you here, just go and give it a rating. If you've listened to enough on Spotify, you should be able to give it a rating. Apparently it'll help me get up the charts. If you can go to Apple Podcasts, leave a rating on there as well, if that's what you use or if you got access to it, because apparently it all helps spread the show. Anyway, I'll let you get back into the show. We're going to stick with America for a little bit longer, and we're going to briefly consider their explosive mines and factories that they've got dotted across their land. We mentioned the fireworks manufacturers last week in the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio episode, and a bit further back, you might remember that the Mothman was usually witnessed near a TNT mine, so it's fair to say that there's some form of connection, or at least correlation, between otherworldly monsters and explosives. And that mention of otherworldly creatures brings us very nicely to the Chinese. Now, the Chinese believe in dragons, like we learned a few episodes back, and they also have their New Year's Eve at a different time of year. Next year, it's going to be on the 23rd of January 2023, but sometimes it can be in the last week of February. India, they have it around March time. The Iranians have it when the Zoroastrians do, and, who would have thought that word would come up so often after I included it in my first book, Uneducated Guesses, all those years ago. It's kind of like some form of synchronicity trying to push me towards the word. Anyway, the Iranians tend to have it on March 20th, 21st, which is when Aleister Crowley and the Thelemic Order also celebrated the New Year, so maybe the Iranians could be onto something there. Aleister's Thelemic Order celebrate the start of New Year as well for about a month, so it starts around the 20th of March and ends around the 21st of April. The current time of year as well that the ancient Egyptian New Year's Eve would fall, for the past 100 years and the next 100 years, can you guess what date it is? I'll give you a little second. 1, 2. That's, mate. September 11th. And it gets tied to Thoth as well, who I plan to cover once I finish reading the couple more books that I've got here. But that's weird, innit? That they'd have New Year's Eve when we would also have 9/11. And it's also weird that 9/11 seems to fall smack bang in the middle of the time when their New Year's Day would be. Almost like they were trying to make sure it was definitely at the right time of year for whatever they're trying to do with the ancient Egyptians, what the ancient Egyptians believed about gods and aliens. Now, there is a lot of stuff where the Twin Towers seem to correlate with ancient Egypt and an ancient religion followed by certain celebrities and politicians from all around the world, but that's for a future episode once I've gotten through these books that I just mentioned. Like, there's things about logos and things like that where they all seem to symbolise two towers and like a crescent moon or a line through the towers, which a lot of people correlate 9/11 to. I want to get back to the Chinese as well for a moment. So with the Chinese, what I was thinking there was how they have the fireworks and that going off and the dragons on the street. Maybe it's a sort of way to say, if we put these chemicals in the air of these colours and these different pigments, maybe it's a way to stop you from being able to see these extra-dimensional entities, the dragons, the lizard people, the ghosts, whatever you want to call them, the beings from a different reality that seem to walk amongst us, and definitely are literally walking amongst us, with us inside of them as dragons to make them look like they're moving and flying around down the road and that. Maybe they put the fireworks in the sky so that we're all looking at that rather than paying attention to the dragons, as a little subtle way of saying, you know, like how we have TV and it's like, look at your TV, watch your TV, listen to what your TV says, get entertained by the TV, ignore what your own brain's telling you, ignore what you've seen outside. Ignore the fact that you definitely saw a ghost on that country lane. Ignore that because the telly's telling you ghosts aren't real. That's just what the Chinese are doing with the firework displays around New Year's Eve and displaying the dragons. No one's looking at the dragon costumes, only the kids. The kids are looking at the dragon costumes because they can't see the fireworks through all the Chinese people's heads as they look up from the ground, from the street and that. They only see the dragons, which is something that a lot of people seem to believe, that children are able to perceive this other reality through this, I don't know, this air that we as adults can't see, but children can see them. And then after a while they get berated enough at school and places like that. Because if anywhere does do school well, it's going to be China, innit? Where they're telling them, you know, them things don't exist, stop paying attention to them, blah, blah, blah. But this week's about fireworks, innit? That's why it's called the Big Bang Theory. And it might feel like I was lost on one of my regular asides there, but ironically, that was a distraction to make you forget about the fireworks because I wanted to prove a point to you. Look how simply, just me, how I can take your mind off the most important thing going on. In this instance, that being the topic of the show. So, what if that same logic was applied to events where fireworks are used? Are they just a distraction used to stop us paying attention to something else that's going on? Because, to me, and possibly to you as well, it seems strange, doesn't it, that the whole world wouldn't have the same date to mark the amount of times the sun has circled above the flat earth, or for the amount of times the moon has chased the sun around the earth, or the amount of times Ra and Set have conquered the underworld and killed that massive snake, or even the amount of times the earth has revolved around the sun. It's weird, isn't it? We can't agree on that. It does make sense, though, when you realise that some places in the world are in the future, whilst you've got countries like Ethiopia firmly stuck in the past. 7 years in the past, they're stuck in 2014. George Eastman would have loved Ethiopia. He would probably where he got the idea from for the 13-month calendar. But that's another show. We should probably just do a show on George Eastman and finally get it out of my system. But why is everywhere so adamant about having set nights each year where they've conditioned the population to explode chemicals in the air? Are they signalling something? And trying to make sure that there is definitely a signal being sent as frequently as possible so that whoever it's intended for is definitely able to receive it? Or is it a warning? Maybe it's like Peter Kay's 3 rings for his mum. You know, we blow up a bunch of toilet rolls full of gunpowder to signal to the people or creatures hiding in the quote-unquote moon that everything is well. And then when they don't see these explosions, they're like, fucking hell, something's kicking off down there. We better go down and sort it. Just like how Peter Kay's mum would panic if she didn't get the 3 rings and that when he'd been out. No one would be able to decipher that either. Not like you could if you was to use a machine to send out a signal to the moon, or you left them a signal by rearranging the tectonic plates using underground machinery. That's probably in the deep underground military bases of America, in order to move the tectonic plates to make the countries read SOS in the ocean as it passes by the moon. So by having huge explosions, what I imagine are causing some form of memorable chemical emissions in the air, noticeable chemical emissions in the air. Maybe the scientists up there in the moon, in the hybridization laboratory that we think is in there, maybe them scientists, they know that everything is as it should be, And that's our way of saying, don't worry about us, you crack on, mate. You carry on doing what you're doing. You keep making those angel creatures and sending them down here every now and then. Eventually they'll be able to survive down here. Eventually they won't just burn or turn to dust in our atmosphere. Maybe you'll be able to make a warrior race out of these creatures. Who knows, you know. Now, a lot of people think that these scientists in the moon are Nazis. There's the second mention of them. But I'm not sure. Because I recently heard as well that there's evidence to suggest that Hitler was trying to work alongside. This is from Linda Moulton Howe as well, in a recent talk she gave. But I heard that there's evidence to suggest that Hitler and the Nazis were working alongside a race of insect-like species of alien. And that's part of what World War II was actually about. So maybe it's these praying mantis-like aliens, known as a mantid species, that are in the moon, conducting the experiments in order to create the human-animal hybrids that all the Disney films are telling us about through their subtle image placement. But to be fair, Disney does kind of disprove my theory, but in other ways, very much solidifies it as well. So let's have a song, and then we'll take a look at Disneyland or Disney World. This is the acoustic version from Up All Night from Classified's new album with Javier Maite. I've got a Patreon now as well with little bonus shows if you fancy that. For £3.50 and up a month you get video versions of these shows so you can watch my face as I'm reading these. You get an almost daily show. We're up to I think 73 at the point of recording this one now, plus little extra premium episodes and a full length premium episode every now and then, normally based on a film. So go and have a look for £3.50. You know, you give it a go, I get £3.50 and you get a load of extra stuff to listen to. Just listen to my paranoid, listen to me basically just fall down a hole. Anyway, I'll let you crack on with the show. So in Disney World, right, a lot of nights they do these massive fireworks displays, even though Disney are constantly used to spread the propaganda about global warming and pollution, you know. One rule for them and another for us, innit? Same as everything. Do as I say, not as I do. Which makes sense because there's been loads of stuff in popular films that say the Nazis are evil, and Disney owns most of these film studios, yet Disney's reported to have done a lot of work with ex-Nazis. So it's a very strange place for us to get our lessons from and for us to develop a conscience from, you know, especially as children. But think about Disney World. You've got at least Animal Kingdom, you've got the Epcot Centre, you've got MGM Studios, and the main one with the castle, which I think is called Magical Kingdom. Anyway, Animal Kingdom, though, that'd be a fucking well good place to introduce, quote, newly discovered species, end quote, aka species that have been hybridized in the floating fucking laboratory in our night sky, the moon. Think about how many millions of people pass through as well each month through Animal Kingdom, absorbing all these fake facts about fucking giant anteaters, completely ignoring how they've never even seen or heard of a regular anteater or even the fucking alternative teacup anteater. There's been loads of propaganda as well to tell us over the years that elephants are dwindling in numbers throughout my life at least. From shills on TV like David Attenborough, whose own brother parried him in the blockbuster film Jurassic Park in the mid-90s. We also get told that we don't know where elephants go when they die, which brings up a couple of questions. Do elephants somehow metamorphosize? Are they captured and used for wars like the Persians did in Age of Empires 2? Or is there something much more sinister going on with elephants? Do they somehow develop fur, or do they just burrow down to the hollow earth and then develop the fur when they get down there? Is that where the mammoths come from? They're never going to tell us these things. Do you remember when we found out about those elephants that live in jungles as well? I don't think I've ever mentioned them on here, but there was a species of elephants that we discovered in the past, I want to say 10, 15 years or so, that was just somehow fucking overlooked. An elephant, we never seen it before. We've already been prepped as well for the existence of a smaller breed of more manageable elephant in the knockout game Zoo Tycoon 2 with the Extinct Animals DLC with that Sicilian dwarf elephant. Now, it was under our noses this whole time, mate. Now, Sicily is a part of Italy. Italy's shaped like a boot, and the indoctrination from Zoo Tycoon 2 and the Disney classic film Dumbo, which we'll definitely do an episode on, with a mini elephant in it, was this new species' foot in the door of all of our collective acceptance, mate. It's right there, mate. They just use symbols and fucking different pictures and that in order to fill in the sentences and fill in the gaps. That's how easy they're able to change our reality, or at least our perception of reality, mate. Next, we've got the Epcot Centre, which has a load of countries of the world in there, right? Represented all by harmful stereotypes. Another thing that Disney seems to be against, but somehow build all of their films on up until a certain point. But you know who wasn't against harmful stereotypes? The Nazis, mate. They fucking loved them. The Epcot Centre also has this focus on space travel and so-called science, right? Packaged up as infotainment, which is the propaganda's word for their propaganda. Indoctrinating people to a certain amount of countries in the world and to the layout of space. It shows as well, it proves to us, the listeners of this show and the listeners of many other popular shows who think for ourselves, it shows to us that science can't be real, because it'd be well expensive to build a theme park centred around science, because, as we've said before to each other on air, quote unquote science is supposed to be constantly evolving, but it's not. That's what makes it science, right? Like the fish that became us, and like the unfathomable creature will become either by the forced evolution brought onto us by our creators and our oppressors in the moon, or by nature itself. But it can't. The theme park can't change. That's based on science. But this place set in stone and polystyrene can never change because it's too expensive. How would they be able to afford it, and all the script changes and that, and the photo opportunities, everything, mate? They would never do it. They'd be constantly rebuilding stuff if it was based on real science. It's just impossible. Then we've got MGM Studios there as well. They use MGM Studios as a way to draw us all in with nostalgia, have us all nostalgia wanking in front of our kids. They lap up the nostalgia, right? These people, us, we lap up the nostalgia whilst being steadily prepped for the future by taking part in roller coasters and thrill-seeking activities while music plays and videos play in the background that enter our subconscious, whilst we're all forced into fight or flight responses by mechanical means of 60 miles an hour roller coasters and dips and drops and loop-de-loops and things like that, and dark spaces and loud noises, all messing with our brain chemistry. Then you've got that main bit of Disney World with the castle. The castle that supposedly depicts the castle where the King of the Hollow Earth resides in the city of Shambhala, which is yet another thing that brings this back to the Nazis. Hitler was supposedly looking for the entrance to Shambhala. That's why he was always hanging around with those monks, and why he supposedly died underneath that German car park with a handful of Buddhist monks with him, or Taoist monks, with him. You know, it's all there, mate. It's all there. It's all the same messages is there. Now, fireworks. Where do they fit in with all this? Well, have you ever heard of a type of therapy called EMDR therapy? It's a type of therapy that's used in victims of PTSD, where rapid eye movement and fast flashing, blinking lights and or patterns of sound are used to help reprogram a person's brain, putting in new thoughts, new memories, altering memories, tunneling into the brain and filing memories away in the infinite filing system of a human mind, all used to reprogram a person's brain. So by you bringing all of your kids to Disneyland, the kids are reliving the trauma of the fox getting left in the woods by that old lady, Bambi's man being shot by that fella, or whatever else happens in the depressing parts of Disney films, of the kids' films. But ignoring how upsetting children at the start of a film by killing all of Nemo's brothers and sisters and the mum before trying to convince them that it's cool to be a vegan after traumatising them. That's another thing we'll do one on. We'll do one on Finding Nemo, because that's just fucking vegan propaganda. We don't need to focus on that, because your kids aren't focusing on that when they're there. You know, it's already in their subconscious, hidden deep in the memories, being plucked back to the forefront of their minds as they walk around and buy toys and see their favourite characters standing around and waving at them. Now, whilst all that trauma is resurfacing from seeing these characters' mums die on telly, and they're experiencing that weird blur of fantasy and reality that kids seem to experience all the time when they're seeing aliens and ghosts and demons just walking around anyway, passing through walls and talking to them, and we as adults are going, that's not real, ignore it. But then we go Disneyland and we're like, look, there's Woody, and the kid's like, but I thought Woody wasn't real and I thought he was tiny. No, that's Woody, that, because you want to get your most out of what you've spent on the holiday, because otherwise it's fucking pointless, because why would you spend the money on it and then tell the kid none of it's real unless you're fucking cruel, right? They're experiencing that blur blur of fantasy and reality. And then the organisers, the owners of the parks, the owners of your imagination, the owners of your mind, top off your day with a light show, causing their eyes to flicker whilst observing a specially formulated fireworks display that could have been specifically curated to alter the brain chemistry. So they put the chemicals in the air, they dissipate through the air and get inhaled, and that alters your brain chemistry. But also the flashing of lights, the certain colours, the brightness of the lights, the booms associated, the booms with it, you know, the big noises, they doing something to your brain. The certain colours will access certain parts of your brain. The patination of it as well might do something to your brain. So they're altering your brain chemistry and the layout of the neurons in your brain by using these lights like you would an EDMR specialist. Just like how with the British celebration of Bonfire Night could be used as a way to use fireworks and the primal fear of fire instilled with us all because of films like Jungle Book. That's all used to prevent a public uprising and subconsciously scare any potential domestic terrorists away from trying to topple the government in case they end up as, you know, an out-of-work scarecrow sat next to some 10-year-old in an SO4 court on the edge of a Mancunian estate. Let's have a song, though, and then we'll look at some of the more day-to-day implications of organised firework displays. This is Situated by Brother Ali and Pharaoh Munch. You see, I've always thought that during a big fireworks display, like the big organised fireworks displays, that's got to be a fucking well good time to commit crimes, innit? Not just, you know, robbing the cars of the people attending the fireworks displays, but larger scale crimes like human trafficking, important meetups for the high level criminals, and for the disposal of bodies as well. An organised fireworks display is one of the few times that you know that the police are going to be otherwise occupied, especially in the densely populated areas of the country. You always tend to see police at them as well, keeping an eye on things, you know, just having a presence. And think about how many of them happen in each city, especially the bigger cities. It's not just one for Manchester, one for London, one for Birmingham, one for Hull. There's loads going on in these places. So all of the police, the resources are stretched thin because they've got to keep an eye on these things. What if people throw deodorant cans? What if fucking people try and rob the travellers that have set up the fairs there? You know, things like that. There's lots of crimes to be had at these events, so the police have to be there, and for public safety as well, in case things kick off or if there's a problem. Same for ambulances. Probably fire engines are probably on call a lot during that time of the year. Then, you know, the 5th of November and then weekends surrounding it where other places might have the events. So there's tons of these organised firework displays, isn't there? So there's a couple coppers at each one. Now, that's going to vastly increase the police's response time to the reporting of a crime, innit? Like, to get in there on the scene, if you like. All you would really need to do, then, on one of these days, is hire some kids to cause some trouble somewhere for a while, and you could easily go about some risky business, you know, a bit of prostitution or a bit of human trafficking, you know, the county lines, mate. Probably a great time for county lines operations to take place. This is why I've never wondered where all of the money for these events comes from. It's got to be expensive, innit? Buying all these fireworks. A box of like 20 quid's worth of fireworks doesn't get you much, and they're normally shit. I've always just presumed that the bigger criminals in the area use their business fronts to pay for them, you know, so that they can arrange other activities around town or move products from one place to another without being stopped by the police. It's like how the cities with huge rates of crime tend to have the bigger, more successful football clubs, because this ensures that the criminals of the area, it ensures to them that the police will be preoccupied at the games on their horses and that, you know, trying to scare pissheads and usher people to the train stations, whilst, you know, the criminals can do their localised business dealings. But on Bonfire Night, they know the police all around the country are busy in the early evenings until about 10 o'clock at night. Think about how far across England you could travel if you had from 5 in the evening till 10 at night, especially knowing that everyone's going to be at events and the roads are going to be clear and there's going to be barely any police cameras about and that watching. So that gives them a good window to do some really dodgy stuff like packaging up their mail order brides to ship on, or boxing up drugs, or hosting illegal betting at cockfights in industrial estates, you know. And I reckon that's all I've got time for this week. I think I made quite a good case as well this time for why we should all be suspicious of fireworks. I didn't even get to mention about how the government seems to be coming after your dogs, trying to take your dogs away from you, and how fireworks are a great way to weed out some of the weaker dogs, you know. causing them to have heart attacks and that from fear and panic and stress, whilst making the more powerful dogs more likely to attack their owners' children out of fear, using up their one bite because of the fireworks, meaning that the government can then make you put your dog down next bonfire night because it's currently only legally allowed one bite attack in its lifetime. But if you want to hear more about the government trying to take your dogs away from you, you might want to try my almost daily Patreon episodes on www.patreon.com/worldaroundyou, where for about £3 a month, maybe £3.50 a month, you can hear an almost daily episode about whatever it is I've been thinking about the night before or in that morning. And I have definitely been bringing up about how the government are trying to take our dogs away from us, and how the government are trying to force you to put your dog down so that when they come into your house they don't have to deal with dogs. Anyway, that's enough for this week. Thanks for listening. Leave us a rating. Send it to a mate, share it somewhere on the internet to help me reach more people. Don't forget about the shirts on worldaroundyou.com as well. But yeah, leave a rating, send it to a mate, that all helps as well. Or fucking see us in a bit, mate.